Arc 6, Chapter 86. Conversing of what yesterday held, since long before she had harbored misgivings. Her lord whom she devoted her allegiance to, Roswal L. Mathers, for the purpose of achieving his ultimate goal, killing the dragon who safeguarded the kingdom of Lugnica, was necessary. She was a vital and indispensable piece for that plan of Roswal's, for Ram to have heard that from none other than himself would be an event that occurred close to 10 years in the past. The village of the Oni clan blazing scarlet, having saved Ram and redacted from there, Roswal sought recompense. And, in exchange for retribution for the Oni clan, Ram decided to pay that compensation. That she shall thus cooperate, let it be for the plan to kill the dragon or whatever else. But merely for a singular point was Ram unable to find the answer within herself, that being the essential way of killing the dragon. It was not easy. Even if plans were to be meddled around with and measures were to be taken, that was not easy. Should that moment arrive, simply what would Ram be able to do? You will know when the time comes. Your role, which only you two elder sister and redacted can fulfill. She felt she had once heard such words, which had been chipped off. Curiously, she had never given deep thought to what that meant until today, but it is finally understood. What Roswal Sama was aiming for. All of Roswal's actions were for the purpose of the ultimate goal he had clasped throughout his long lifetime. For that purpose, he had concealed himself deep within the kingdom of Lugnica. For that purpose, he had saved Ram and redacted. For that purpose, he had put a check on Sanctuary as a touchstone. For that purpose, he had tested Natsuki Subaru. Even if he inevitably had to alter his original scheme, all of the preparation until that point had not been futile. No, he would not let it be rendered futile. That was who he was. Hence, the answer came forth within Ram as well. The reason why Roswal took custody of a pair of young Oni elder sister and redacted. The redacted had been taken in as substitute for Ram's lost horn. The elder sister and redacted that were Ram and redacted, with the two of them acting as a single Oni, he had taken them in his hand for killing the dragon. Naturally, not even Roswal could escape from the effects of the authority of gluttony. As a matter of consequence, he too must have forgotten why redacted had been taken into his mansion. However, even if he had forgotten, he must have immediately discerned his own self's aim. And, whilst observing Ram and the others make strenuous efforts to recover redacted from the damage of gluttony, he did not disclose that truth. Honestly, he is so. His scrupulous nature won't change, isn't it? Though his plans had once suffered a setback due to Subaru's actions, he yet resumed his handiworks for fulfilling his goal behind the scenes and whilst remaining vigilant for a chance to strike. A nuisance of a nature. Wonder what he must be doing about now, when Ram was not there to watch him. However, so she thought as well. That, in this journey, by the point of having allowed Ram to accompany Subaru and the others as they tried to save redacted, could Roswal have perchance foreseen the possibility of things turning out this way? She may be overthinking. To begin with, the appearance of the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony in Pleiades' watchtower was an unforeseen circumstance, and there was no way he could have possessed confidence in Ram and redacted being placed into a hazardous situation. This may have been an excessive misapprehension on Ram's part, an overestimation of the man she dearly loved. However, it feels far better to believe that the man you love placed trust in you anyways. That he thought, should Ram be there, redacted, and the other members will remain safe and protected. That he thought, if need be, Ram would take notice of the supposition Roswal had concealed, and by her volition would turn over the trump card for the purpose of killing the dragon, that he bore such faith. That the man named Roswal L. Mathers had acknowledged the 10 years of the woman named Ram, to believe so felt far better. That is why Ram. Right now, Ram truly feels the greatest she ever has. Kindly get knocked down. The scene changes. The accomplishments established by the Fist King Niji Rockheart is a noteworthy narrative in the Gladiator Island Jinnenhive of the sacred Valatia Empire. No, once had been a narrative, having been met by the tragedy of the authority of gluttony. Now, with both sides of name and memories plundered, There existed not anyone anywhere who knew of the achievements established by him as a gladiator. On the gladiator island, wherein strength was used for exhibition, Niji, solitarily, using his empty hands as weapons, survived hundreds of death duels, and finally attained the right of liberation from slavery. Conceiving the refined fighting spirit in his fists, intercepting swords and daggers, before his fists which shattered steel whatsoever obstacle was equivalent to a maiden's soft skin, he likely could have been termed as the one to have beaten the most humans to death in history. With his inordinately brutal, nefarious techniques, the carnivorous beast Balihainalga is a rare serial killer who made the holy kingdom of Gustico shudder. No, once had made it shudder, having been met by the tragedy of the authority of gluttony. Now, with both sides of name and memories plundered, the vast counts of misfortune and precepts he yielded as a murderer remained not in anyone's memories. By birth, Bali displayed abnormal growth and acquired strength of physical body impossible to be realized in average humans. And, embracing the men of his liking to death, he piled up copious, atrocious crimes. Superhuman strength which his enormous build materialized, and sturdy skin which sustained not a single scratch from swords and daggers. This murderer, who sought touch and warmth, was one of the most dreadful criminals feared along with the bowel hunter. 1. The career history of the leaper Dorkel is eccentric. Formerly a merchant living in Kararagi city-states, Dorkel is a deviant who disengaged from his path upon hearing the voice of something not human, so he had once been. Met by the tragedy of the authority of gluttony, now with both sides of name and memories plundered, the truth of him having become a laughingstock for many as a deviant vanished, with there no longer being anyone remembering that. One certain day, Dorkel discarded away his life, including his wife and children. And, opting for the path espousing that which did not exist, he became a freak who chose to have contact with the witch cult. Though Dorkel manifested a paramount power differing from magic, it deviated from the doctrine of the witch cult, a heresy within heresy banished even from the witch cult. In other words, they were transcendental beings from the kinds of enigmatic persons, eccentric persons, and deranged persons. Impossible to be competed against by ordinary humans. Furthermore, they remained unfinished by the mere virtue of being themselves, and blended together with all possible kinds of memories within gluttony, had been finished into articles of greater superlativeness. What would be the consequence should Niji Rockheart obtain Balihainalga's endurance and Dorkel's ability of phantom teleportation? It will be the fruition of a singular, brutal, fiendish, atrocious existence seldom seen throughout time. Until now, and amongst all of what yesterday held, the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, Lay Baiting Catos, had not achieved that. For within the grand hot pot named his self, by blending all probable kinds of memories together, he feared the very existence named himself being taken into the hot pot. However, even if he were to drink up the contents of the mixed hot pot, he shan't be taken in at the very least. That was what Baiting Cato's notion came to be. And since it had come to be so, he experimented what all he had never ventured to do until now, possessing not the slightest of qualms or hesitance for breaking through the established bounds of his own self. For the gourmet who utterly ate every possible kind of excelling, transcending talent, history, potentiality in this world all until the very horizons of gourmet delicacies, and persisted in amassing it all within oneself, is precisely whom Lay Baiting Catos was. Thus on this day, what was born in the tower situated at the eastern edge of the world was a warlock agglutinated with every technique and odd talent, regardless of heredity and posteriori. The warlock possessed arms which destroyed all, possessed a flesh body which did not accept any type of attacks, possessed magical arts which rejected and countered back any possible technique, and was endowed with even the wisdom, genius, and intellect grasping everything that existed. No matter how extensive a survey should be taken of history, never had there been a being who excelled in every single kind of ability to this extent, and neither will any other take birth hereafter, for thousands of years to come. This was a selection of the world's possibilities, brought forth by the abominable calamity referred to as a witch factor. Born from the grand hot pot which condensed solely excelling articles, the supreme gourmet delicacy itself, ram. You shall be given, 3 chances. With that rare existence before her, the young girl with peach-colored hair uttered with 3 fingers raised. The young girl, bleeding from her forehead, with an icy gleam in her light crimson eyes. She was in a condition wherein wounds covered her entire body, and multiple spots of her slim build had sustained tremendous injuries which would impede in movement. Even aside from those, there existed a mountain's worth of reasons why she should not be able to stand up. He was aware of that, the prime cause not being wounds or blood loss, but that her petite body failed to function as a vessel for accepting the existence named herself. Truly heartrending, he ruminated so. Ram, 3 times you shall be allowed to strike first. There is something Ram would like to test. Exceptional, is it not? However, such deep emotions concerning her not in the slightest, the young girl asserted so whilst 3 of her fingers remained raised, as though to instigate this side. Thrice a deathly verdict. To begin with, even once would be implausible for her to endure, and neither did he possess any particular reason to disregard that avouch. He not at all contemplated whether this was a trap, either. For the young girl was not one who would meaninglessly proffer such negotiation. He merely thought he must earnestly impart to her that unbridled confidence brought about the destruction of oneself on instances as well. That upon being taken into the same grand hot pot, there shall also be things understood lay. Ni-sama, stand by. Vehemently, making his hind legs amassing strength erupt, he hammered a blow as per wish. That was a strike crammed with the fist king's technique and finesse of destructive force, possessing far too excessive might for the destruction of a solitary young girl, and it was absorbed by well-featured visage of the young girl, Ram. Now first, lay hic. During the moment he conceived he had captured her with certainty. The face of the young girl evaded the fist from a vicinity, seemingly close enough for Lanugo to graze past. And positioning her hand on the stretching arm, her fired knee strike smashed the right arm from the elbow. An improbable happening. The tenacious flesh body even the slashes of the heavenly sword could not penetrate into. Its stretched arm and the joint of the elbow by kneeing into the fixed point that existed solely at this locus were destroyed by the young girl. However, with the impact of the fractured right arm as is, he fired his left foot up towards the young girl's visage. Though not reprisal for the arm, this side's own fired knee aimed for her face as well. The lengthy, slender leg, the fair knee smashed and crushed the young girl's tender snout, ruining her gorgeous visage, Ram. Second! Upon hearing the utterance vocalized by those slim lips, he doubted his ears. He had executed it such that her mouth would be rendered defunct. However, responding to the knee strike approaching from the side, the young girl moved her hand as though nimbly tracing it, and gently averted its trajectory upward. The fired knee smoothly transited overhead of the young girl, as though it had been fired to trace the empty skies from the very beginning. And, Ram, third! With his right arm and left knees strike dodged, using the impetus of his gyrating body he fired a rebuff from his left elbow, sharp and solid. Upon making a direct hit, it shall crush the young girl's cranium like a berry, and expel its contents out onto the floor of the tower. So it should have done. The rebuff aiming for the young girl's temple of the forehead was halted merely by a number of swivels of her body. And the young girl, dodging the elbow as if informed of its arrival, grasped this side's face once again with her extended hands, Ram. Truly a fool. And voicing with maximum cold-heartedness, vigorously knocked this side's cranium onto the floor. The scene changes. Twisting, turning, winding, meandering, Baiting Kato's changed his form before her eyes and charged, advancing towards her, and upon knocking him to the ground, Ram pointed 3 fingers towards his face. Ram, one who spars thinking he has 3 chances, gets defeated in all 3 of those chances. Should you spar with not even the serious intent to win, then you shall be abandoned even by fortune. Lay, boo, ga, hic. Ram, thank you, it has been proven. Not even the serendipity of time is now an enemy of Ram. For Ram, the utmost appalling enemy was absurd fortune itself. However, Ram had exorcised that by her own hand, and had made even that prostrate before herself. No longer was there anything to be fearful of. Lay, Sue. Sprawled on the ground, Baiting Kato swung both of his legs up, and stood up with the impetus of swinging them down. And towards the approaching enemy seeking to hammer his fractured arm in, Ram stepped ahead, wielding no vacillation. Blood streamed down from her forehead. However, that ache and sense of loss boiled Ram's blood from the innermost depths. Ah, how truly infuriating. This sensation, this enchantment, always had she thought of it as vexatious. The odious Oni instincts, warmly welcoming battling, exalting the brandishing of strength, the craving which boiled blood for the purpose of killing enemies who ought to be killed, had Ram always detested. That is why, that night, when the horns sprouting from her forehead had been broken off, she thought she had been liberated, and yet, Ram, how truly ironic! Grousing so, Ram caught the hammer arm and shoulder through the opponent with identical momentum. Casting him onto the floor, she kicked his head, propelling him further towards the interior of the aisle. She could not allow him to draw close to her rear, wherein was the mutilated ground dragon, along with the young girl leaning on the wall. Rem, the young girl who resumed her slumber without change, the horn fleetingly glimmering on her forehead asserted being. Originally, the young girl who remained asleep possessing no will of her own could not have made her horn function, regardless of being a member of the Oni clan. However, even with the actual feeling of that remaining vanished, Ram was twin sisters with the young girl that which is referred to as synthesia, was a substanceless link oft tied between blood-related beings. Having attended to the perpetually slumbering Rem during the past year, Ram too had sensed that existence itself. Not by merely the similitude of outward appearance, but precisely due to the presence of that sensation, Ram had succeeded in objectively accepting the truth of that girl being her younger sister without dissent. However, between herself and Rem, even the synesthesia remained odiose. Had Rem gotten even a single nightmare, her fright may have gotten transmitted to Ram. However, during this past year, not even once had anything akin gotten transmitted to her. In other words, the perpetually slumbering Rem saw no dreams. Unceasingly, she simply gazed into the darkness beyond her eyelids, merely respiring within a desolate, void world. Thus, it was not but a coincidence for her to have noticed this way of abusing said synesthesia here. Though irksome, it was by dint of Subaru's idea. Because he took up Ram's burden through a queer power and bestowed upon her the strength to fight, she conceived an idea accomplishing the same. Those connected together with synesthesia shared mighty sentiments, or even wounds and agony at times. Though she was ignorant of its principle, this hypothesis was there within a book in Beatrice's forbidden archive which she had once read in the past, that what was termed as synesthesia operated with the connection of the odd between two differing individuals. What was termed as the odd was the source of power existing in the depths of the human. It could also be synonymous for the soul. Though on instances it was also used in place of mana as power for utilizing magic. Originally, the odd was the pure property itself that made the human be human. The consequence of having a territory that shan't be trespassed by anyone, that mutually linked those born of the same womb, perhaps resulted in synthesia, so propounded the theory. In the end, it came to be determined as a common belief, and was not something that had been proven. However, since it had been left in the forbidden archive, it surely was not some phony spiel either. Above all else, Ram personally had taken a liking to that theory. To have one's own self and someone else be connected together by birth was a lovely thing. Ram. A multitude of problems were caused due to that bothersome horn after all. The impulse of destruction transmitted by that white horn, Ram loathed it. She was exasperated by her environs, lionizing Ram as the reincarnation of the Oni god as well. There existed not a fragment of connection between that obscure obsolete being and Ram. Ram shan't deem value in precisely such an entity. Henceforth, to have one's own self and someone else be connected together by birth, independent of such an entity, was a lovely thing. And if such a connection with someone truly did exist, Ram. Certainly, by birth itself, Ram could not have been stopped from loving her. Even as an infant, she shan't pay regard to means for the sake of protecting that bond. For the sake of protecting her, for the sake of admiring her, for the sake of adoring her, for the sake of loving her, she shall surely devote her all. Thus, Ram, please do forgive. Your bad knee Sama, who is making you shoulder the burden at this time as well. By way of synesthesia, Ram shared the burden levied upon her own flesh body to her sleeping younger sister. It was in consequence of having experienced Subaru's authority by herself once. Having witnessed something once, Ram could largely materialize it identically. What Subaru did was an identical contrivance. It possibly coercively connected others' odd with one's own odd, inducing a fairly arbitrary synesthesia. Subaru's side could possibly consign his burden over if he felt inclined to do so as well, but since Subaru was a fool, he would not do so. Contrarily, by taking it upon himself, he endeavored to abate the burden of his allies. Ram, truly a fool. Words she had pronounced toward baiting Kato's a short time ago. However, despite being the same words, they did not echo the same. What Subaru had achieved through the authority, Ram could reconstruct it with Rem, whom she was connected to through synesthesia. She was oblivious to what had transpired at Subaru's side. However, this would surely serve to ease him. Ram, too, could abscond from the repulsive situation, namely being connected with Subaru for long. In lieu, Ram's burden was streaming towards Rem, although Rem, perpetually slumbering, spoke not. Merely gallantly, splendidly, with the white horn she was made to grasp in her stacked hands Ram's broken horn that had been fitted inside her wand. With that as a catalyst, she was consigning the mana flowing into her own horn over to Ram. It was unfathomable how prodigious a burden shall be laid onto Rem's body for mediating the expansive mana which Ram required. Therefore, this was a decisive battle of brief duration. Lei, ni sama atsu, a roar into time, after having been hurled by her kick, baiting Kato's rebounded towards Ram while smiling. Utilizing the might of the seeming leaper, the magical technique erased the existing distance in between in the span of a blink of an eye, however. Even that technique of phantom teleportation was rendered futile should it get viewed in its entirety by the opponent. Ram, you certainly are slow, sluggard. At this rate, Ram will become an old woman. She purloined the opponent's field of vision with clairvoyance. The opponent's focus, eye movements, the part wherein strength was being poured. By synthesizing these, she could read the aim with greater ease than reading the mind. Dodging the perforating palm, she reversely twisted all 5 of its fingers as it slipped through. Pounding a rebuff into his throat, seeking to give rise to a skreek, she slammed the opponent into the wall with a sharp spinning kick. Lei. Gah, hick, Ram, although Ram is cute even when she has grown old. Whilst pronouncing so, she seized the opponent's nape through his clothes and lowered it, dropping him onto the floor by his head yet again. Pelting that face with her heel, she pulverized his snout. Stepping backward and evading both of the arms attempting to grasp her, she belabored him with innumerable blades of wind. Lei. Guy oa a Ram. What an ugly shriek, coming from such an adorable face. His entire body slashed by blades of wind, baiting Kato's disappeared whilst spouting blood. As ever, his flesh body unremittingly repeated transfiguration, however, solely what was atop his neck, that which she was acquainted with by sight, shan attempt to transform. She was close to vomiting, though Ram shall not, because that would be inelegant. Lei. Whilst shedding immense blood, baiting Kato's artlessly swooped down upon her. Stating unerringly, he was surely making free use of miraculous superhuman techniques, coalescing the might of multifarious transcendental beings. From the outset, he must be formulating techniques impossible of being reconstructed by anyone. That excelling blitz, specializing in all possible orientations, was shut down by Ram through outstripping violence. She guillotined those monumental techniques of hundreds, of thousands, using might worth millions. This was what the battle had now come to be. She sought not to even come in contact with baiting Kato's. Her condition felt well. She grew accustomed to it in Subaru's absence after all. She had unfastened approximately 2 more shackles. Likely 50% of her prime, no, since Ram had been very young in those days. Aspects of her that had matured were far mightier now compared to Ram back then. And to not wallow in that might was Ram's forte. Ram. Having the horn broken was correct after all. If it weren't for that night, she may have eventually yielded to the horn's allurement. Though she wanted to proclaim that to be improbable, she could not ascertain if it truly was improbable. Thus, Ram attested to the present being correct and boasted the invigorating nature of the path she had walked. Owing to the loss of her horn, Ram lived without having to become the Oni she detested. Ram. To begin with, if it weren't for that night, Roswal Sama couldn't have been met, so it wasn't even worth making a comparison. No greater conclusion, wielding that as the answer. Ram presented her palm forwards. At the surface of her palm appeared Baden Kato's, having leapt through space. His countenance, astonished by having the point of his appearance read through, she gripped it tight. Ram, you cannot fly in continuity, isn't it? Have grown tired of looking at your magic tricks. And that face as well. Lay. Why, Ram? No waiting. An icy pronouncement, Ram materialized a blade of wind in her palm which grasped the opponent's face. Within that juncture, his eyes, his nose, his lips, his ears, with all possible parts of his face slashed, Baden Kato's screeched whilst vomiting blood. With the same momentum, she gouged his face with the blade of wind until it was minced to naught. And from Ram's palm, who sought to accomplish so, Baden Kato's form disappeared in but an instant. However, albeit he escaped, he shan't be able to escape from the wounds, from the agony, from the reality. Lay. Sue. Whilst squalling, Baden Kato's writhed as he shed profuse blood instead of tears. Whilst observing that, Ram steadily advanced her feet towards his side. Hearing Ram's approaching footsteps, Baden Kato's form changed. The proprietor of a gigantic, burly flesh body. Knocking the imminent fist down, she shattered his knee. Kicked down, Baden Kato's figure altered in order to escape from Ram. The giant of a bearded face, taking a spherical stance, solidified his defense. Kicking his frame upward, she nailed him onto the ceiling with a barrage of fists, gradually transforming what was below his skin, which was the subject of vaunt, into lumps of flesh. In order to kill Ram, who conferred upon him interminable torture, Baden Kato's form altered. The bald old man, the magical technique of phantom teleportation. Whilst pitying the magical trick whose stratagem had already come to light, she caught him, drove his face into the wall, and sprinted as though to whittle his entire frame. Lay. Baba hick. Repressed by Ram's prodigious might, Baden Kato's entire frame was paired, retaining no place to escape to. Winding and meandering, his form transfigured within Ram's grasp as though seeking the optimum solution. Suppressing it altogether, Ram grieved for the hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of victims with all of her might. A memorial held via vehemence for those men and women who had been captured by gluttony, and had the arts they forged, the paths they walked, the emotions they loved, trampled upon, slighted, and disparaged. No longer would arts, paths, emotions be utilized, for naught was efficacious against Ram. Ram, kindly take your own responsibility by yourself. Swinging her arm, Ram heaved aside the blasphemer who had his entire frame tempestuously paired. Falling over the floor of the watchtower, Baden Kato's shuddered and trembled. Slowly, steadily, gradually, his form proceeded to alter. Having relied on multitudes of memories, his form changed. Ram. Long time no see. Ram wanted to meet this face, though this would make for around the third time doing so. Lay. As she wiped off the blood on her forehead and loosened her lips, ahead of Ram's glance was Baden Kato's. It was Baden Kato's, in the truest possible purport. Not the cunning and wily existence who had, until now, borrowed the faces and techniques of others, but Baden Kato's, who had returned to his own face and form. Regardless whom should one become, whom should one depend on, whom should one resort to, it is impossible to escape from oneself. Just as even upon losing her horn, the actuality that Ram was an Oni did not change. Just as even upon having her memories plundered, the actuality that Ram was Rem's elder sister did not change. Ram, in the very end at least, would you like to try resisting using your own strength? Lay. Ram, by the way, you said something curious on the spiral staircase, didn't you? It seems you have a younger brother or younger sister, isn't it? For the sake of your younger siblings, how about putting your willpower to display? Collapsed down, Baden Kato's painful breathing abruptly diminished. He had not lost his life. He had reacted to Ram's remark. Younger brother and younger sister, the moment he heard the echo of those words, Baiting Cato's breath faintly calmed down. And steadily, Baiting Cato's revitalized his body at his locus, lay. Oh, you are, little sister, don't. Ram. Don't lay a finger on her, you say. Sorry, but do you think you're in a position where you can make such an insistence? Have you ever lent your ears to someone's plea even once? Lay, but still. Ram, distorting his blood-stained, crumpled face, Baiting Cato's pleaded with a tearful voice. Upon the call of that poignant yet remarkably genuine echo, Ram slightly straightened her eyes. Afterwards, along with a sigh, she closed her eyes. Ram, will think Lay, Nisama is far too kind. Within the juncture, the moment her gaze went astray, Baiting Cato's bequeathed simply those words behind and erased his form. The spatial leap of the leaper Dorkel leaving not a single vestige behind, the blasphemer vanished from her field of vision. He had escaped. The scene changes. Lay, ha-ha-tsu, ah-ha-ha-tsu, ah-ha-ha-ha. Utilizing the odd talent of leaper Dorkel with freedom, Baiting Cato's fled from Ram's territory. No longer shall he consider recklessness like eating ram. Paying no regard to appearances, he chose flight. Can't win. Can't win. Can't win against that one. Just as he had thought, that one was a monster. How conventional for her to have bought time and returned after becoming more powerful as well. That one was a kind of existence who shan't get atop neither the platter of gourmet nor the platter of bizarre eating. Lay, Louis and Roy, really sorry you too, but you know W. Preliminary preparation of ingredients is crucial in gourmet. Whilst pressing the injuries of his entire body, Baiting Cato's melancholically laughed upon his younger brother and sister, who had been aiming for the same prey. Louis had promptly withdrawn from the war front to safety, and Roy too would be rampaging in a separate site about now. If that Oni were to just aim for those two, he would also be able to withdraw at leisure. Since Roy of bizarre eating did not know when to retreat, he may finally die, but it can't be helped. Rather, he had been getting fed up of Roy's bizarre eating. Because that chap laid waste to hunting grounds per his pleasure, there must have been instances where gourmet delicacies supposed to come around to this side had gotten stolen away. No, had what his self feasted upon until now truly been gourmet delicacies. Lay each and every single one useless. Shit. Shit. Something like that, to think something like that exists, you know W. Even though it would have been all good had we not known about it, you know W. That was not a sentiment induced by the feelings of a younger sister doting on her elder sister. That was a sentiment yearning for something inestimable, unfathomable, immense born from Baiting Cato's. Within, in the truest of truest sense, a potent emotion wishing for its desire from the depths of his heart. Want to completely eat that one. With all of body and soul, want to completely savor that one. Championing gourmet, he intended to have eaten all possible emotions and transcending, excelling talents. However, now that he was aware of the presence of the genuine in this world, everything had faded away. All of what the existence named Lay Baiting Cato's, as the sin archbishop of gluttony, had trusted as possessing worth and garnered, crumbled to ruin and transformed into rubbish. Those lavish dinner tables which had been visible with such glisten had been reduced to sand pits with mud dumplings atop. Lay, want that one. Want it. If for the sake of eating that one, throwing anything and everything away would be completely fine. If for the purpose of eating that one, there would be no regrets in losing all that had been amassed until now. Don't want to savor anything other than that one. Don't want to fulfill oneself with anything other than that one. Lay, abug gui. Whilst sprinting, vomit leaked out from the edge of Baiting Cato's mouth. Pain or anguish were not the cause. It was merely unbearable. Articles he trusted to be the finest were not so, and due to having become aware of what was supreme, all of what fulfilled his self was foul. Why did he regard anything aside from that one as splendid? Commend anything aside from that one? Surfeit anything aside from that one? Simply what of him would be gourmet? should he love anything aside from the truly splendid? Lay. That's right, that is right. Isn't that right? Surely that is right. Certainly that is right. Indeed that is right, because we wish for it to be right. Gluttonous drinking Sue. Gluttony Sue. Surging appetite, hunger advancing toward fulfillment, and the outcry from his heart wishing for and imploring desire. The desire to become one, the desire to blend together. If appetite was to intake external existences, then the gluttony impelling his self was superlative love. Lay, love you, love you. Yes, love you too, Nisama. No, Ram, we love you. The maximal emotion blooming within his self, whilst he attempted to clamor it loud, his words were abruptly interrupted. The cause was pain, and that it was the incidence of a novel anguish. Lay. Checking his cheek, Baden Cato's ascertained his palm dyed with rich blood. The fresh slash, a wound ripping Baden Cato's cheek, who had been heading towards the outside of the tower in order to escape its cause, empty space. Lay. Wordlessly stretching his finger to that point, Baden Cato's observed his finger get cut. In the empty space was an invisible blade. Lay. That was the same technique as what Baden Cato's had displayed to Ram at the spiral staircase. The art of installing blades of invisibility in space was a legendary shinobi technique, but it didn't matter whose memories it was in since he had already thrown it away. The issue was the presence of a blade here, which Baden Cato's did not remember placing behind. Lay. It can't be! Avoiding the blade that had slightly cut his finger, Baden Cato's attempted to advance his feet further towards the interior. His tiptoes were blown off, and he inclined backwards whilst shrieking Ahii hic. And with the inclining back of his head also slightly whittled, he rigidified his face and stood still. He was enclosed by invisible blades. Lay. Seriously. He had shown it to her, merely once. Once in the midst of battle, that too it was an invisible technique, so she must not have seen it either. Moreover, she had not ever practically even stepped foot in this place. Yet regardless, she had seized this side's escape route, and had stationed invisible blades in advance. Lay. Baden Cato's put his hand, not on his left eye which had been slashed by the blade of wind and had ceased functioning, but on his right eye which was narrowly in good health. Through clairvoyance, Ram was jointly sharing this eye. She did not let Baden Cato's escape. Overlapping with this eye, she shan't let him escape. Lay. Hiha. Baden Cato's laughed. No longer could he do anything but laugh. He had loved. For the first time had mightily, powerfully yearned for something. He was charmed by that unordinary essence. And Lay. Wait, please do wait. Hold on, a bit more, just a bit more, so too. No matter how much shall he implore to clairvoyance, the voice shan't reach, that was per knowledge. Thus, his frantic calls were not for the opponent to hear. They were for impelling oneself. In great fluster and haste, Baden Cato's held fast to the wall immediately beside him. He had done something impetuous by discarding away what he had eaten. If only the remarkable genius of the Fist King had remained, he could have overcome this facing no hardship. Deferring those emotions as well, Baden Cato's struck his arms into the invisible blades. The wrists of both of his hands erupting, blood cascaded out of the mouth of those wounds. It hurts, but pain doesn't matter right now. Lay. Please do accept our feelings, Sue. Please do watch over our wishes, Sue. Merely pressing his arms, spouting blood onto the wall, with all of his strength, he drew letters. With dusky blood, using his small, petite body with all of his might, he drew enormous, gigantic letters onto the wall of the sand tower. Lay Buha hic. And making his own self stand back, he viewed those letters with his right eye dilated. For those letters of blood depicted on the wall, to reach the one whom he eternally wished for from the bottom of his heart. Because if her then certainly, until the very end of the end, she shall kindly watch over whilst remaining overlapped with his own self. Lay. Love why, before he could reach the end of his words, the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony had been beheaded by a blade of wind. The scene changes. Ram, Fula. Swinging her fingers, having hurled the blade of wind, Ram whispered merely a single word. Even if the proportion of magic had impact within its range of effect, that power itself did not undergo severe change. Not to mention, if only a slim neck was to be blown off through the cutting ability of the blade of wind, then even the minimum power sufficed. Pursuing the back of Gluttony, who had fled, Ram had fired a solitary blade of wind. She had deftly grasped the trace of the desperately escaping Gluttony through clairvoyance. She had employed certain tricks as a hurdle in his path for her aim to be precise, but they seemed to have functioned well for how hurriedly they had been constructed. And on the brink of the final blade's arrival, Gluttony undertook abnormal conduct. Slashing off his own arms, using that blood, he drew letters of blood onto the wall. Though that which was squalid and dreadfully arbitrary was malignant bedevilment possessing no worth to even be viewed. At the very end of the end, having watched over the upward soar as those blood letters burled and gyrated, she closed her eyes. She did so entirely because she could not have taken relief otherwise. She had not an atom of obligation that she ought to watch over. The blasphemer erred his final choice. Had he put his life on the line for the sake of his younger siblings, Ram would not have denied him mercy either. However, putting aside the undeniable genuinity of his words, he also used that as bait and deceived Ram, making it also a tool for his own self-survival. He likely did not know the method of restoring what was eaten either. Had he known, he was supposed to have pleaded for his life with that as material for negotiation. He did not. Thus, he had to suffer nemesis. Ram. Those who wield the sword fall to the sword. Those who cling to evil fall to evil. Those who yield to fire fall to fire. And those who wish for the Oni fall to the Oni, destroyed by what one relies on. That was the divine providence of retribution Ram placed her faith in. Swinging her arm down, she let a long exhale. Afterwards, Ram turned backwards, returning to the extensively ruined isle. She could not have fought at close vicinity, so she had taken upon herself to be further distant. A vexing sense of distance, hence Ram's gait spontaneously became restless. Dadajun. Once she made her return by treading through the collapsed wall, what greeted Ram was the cry of a tall ground dragon. That jet-black ground dragon had aptly maneuvered its body and concealed Rem's figure behind. Worst-case scenario, had the one to return not been Ram, then it perhaps intended to act like a shield or so. Despite being in such a tattered state, for it to gallantly abide by Subaru's command, it was truly a ground dragon too good for Subaru, Ram. No, that's wrong. Did you also wish to protect Rem? Ram, yes, you truly are a good girl, Patrash. She softly caressed that ground dragon's neck. It would also be necessary to immediately carry her wounded, injured self to the green room as well. Even the ground dragon, who exemplified befitting loyalty, could not be made to strain itself with these injuries. Neither did Ram wish to do anything preposterous to the benefactory dragon of her younger sister. Subsequently, expressing her gratitude to the ground dragon, Ram made her way to Rem, who was being protected behind her. The sharing of the horns might utilizing synesthesia had already been undone, so no horn was present on her forehead. However, the recoil of having shouldered Ram's strength, commensurate with that of the Oni god, had soundly eaten into that body of hers, such that Ram herself felt heavy upon contemplating the recoil that surely will pay a call upon her soon. But Ram, right now at this time, anything boorish cannot be thought of. Gently kneeling down at her position, Ram positioned her hand onto the cheek of her perpetually slumbering younger sister. The bond as sisters devoid of actual feeling, now accompanied with a far greater certitude of actual feeling compared to before, she felt lovability and cherishment overflow. With her horn broken off, having lost her might as the reincarnation of the Oni god, she had lived until today. For what purpose did that night of blazes befall? Until now Ram had surmised it had befell for the purpose of making her herself. Neither did she consider that to be mistaken. However, starting today and this moment, that changed. The reason why that day Ram's horn had been broken off, Ram. It was to realize today here that Ram is Rem's Nisama. For she had been able to actually feel, with the contact between the soul and the soul via synesthesia, that they were twins who shared the same world, that they were irreplaceable elder and younger sisters. Ram. More than ever before, Ram wants to talk to you. What kind of a time did you and Ram spend? What kind of a yesterday did you and Ram collect? Let's replenish the devoid reminiscences together. Since time flowed without halt, however many reminiscences of the future could be mounded. Thus, for everything to not evanesce remaining unknown, remaining unremembered, day after day, let's make flowers bloom in reminiscences as many times as need be. Ram. Let's converse lots of what yesterday held. The sleeping beauty shan't respond. Although, without letting her chest congeal upon her silence, and instead fulfilling it with something warm, Ram smiled. Whilst smiling, with no longer any qualms for her own emotions, she moved her lips. Ram, love you, Rem. Certainly, no matter how the time they had collected by the two of them had been, these emotions alone shan't turn traitor. Enigmatically, upon vocalizing what was identical to the last words of the distorted sin archbishop, though it was ultimately the same note, it did not echo the same. Those who are unbeknownst to love, and those who live in love, can never echo the same. Never can they echo the same.